What's really inside this 14-page bill? It's officially called the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025. At just 14 pages, you might think it's a quick read, but inside those pages sit some big changes that could end up putting real cash in your pocket. I know most people haven't seen a single line of the text, but I've gone through every page, so you don't have to. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what it says, how much money you might get, who qualifies, and a quiet little twist that shows up midway through a twist that could change the way you think about the whole program. Before we dive in, think about this. If an extra $600 landed in your bank account sometime this fall, what would you actually do with it? Maybe you'd put it toward groceries. Maybe you'd set it aside for a short weekend getaway, or maybe you'd just treat the family to a big pizza night. Whatever it is, keep that in mind as we talk, because this is one of those rare political ideas that connects directly to everyday life. If you like straightforward, practical money, talk without all the shouting. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time we sit down and unpack something like this. What is the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025? So let's talk about the American Worker Rebate Act of 2025. Some folks have been calling it the Tariff Rebate Stimulus. 14 pages. No massive novel here, more like a pamphlet you could tuck into your utility bill. But the mission statement on page 1 makes its point loud and clear. It says Congress intends to take tariff revenue collected after January 20th of this year, 2025, and recycle it back to working Americans. Picture the government collecting a fee at the port every time certain goods come into the country and then mailing part of that fee straight back out to households. It's a loop. Importers pay money, flows in a portion, gets sent right back out. 2 lines down on that first page, you'll see the short title, American Worker Rebate Act, and a quick policy statement. The basic idea: make tariffs help families directly, instead of letting all that money disappear into the big federal budget. Straightforward, direct. How much money could you get? Flip over to page 2, and the numbers start showing up. The headline figures $600 per adult, $600 per qualifying child. But here's where it gets interesting. That's not a maximum, it's a floor. In other words, the amount could go higher if tariff collections exceed expectations. Think of it like a balloon tied to customs receipts. The more duties come in, the bigger the balloon gets, and the more your check could grow. That's different from past stimulus programs where Congress usually set a hard cap on how much could go out the door. This one leaves room for growth if the money is there. Which tariffs count for the rebate page? 3 tightens the definition of which tariff proceeds count toward the program. Only duties collected after January 20th, 2025, the day the new tariff schedule under President Trump took effect, will be used to fund it. The idea is to start with a clean ledger. Older tariff revenue stays in the general fund. Newer revenue goes into the rebate pool. The Treasury Department is allowed to use projections instead of waiting for final, perfectly reconciled numbers, which means payments can go out faster. That's important when you consider the political calendar. With the 2026 midterms still more than a year away, there's an incentive to make sure the program makes an impact quickly. Who qualifies and who doesn't? Turn to page 4, and you'll see the income phase-out rules. If your adjusted gross income was over $75,000 last year as a single filer, or over $150,000 if you filed jointly, your rebate will shrink by 5 cents for every dollar above those thresholds. So if you made $95,000 as a single filer, you're $20,000 over the limit. Multiply that by 0.05, and you see your $600 drop to 0. The goal here is to keep the money aimed at middle-income households where $600 can still make a meaningful difference. This page also spells out who's not eligible: non-resident aliens, dependents claimed on someone else's return estates and trusts. In other words, the same kinds of exclusions we saw in 2020 and 2021 with the pandemic checks. That helps prevent double payments or money drifting outside the target group. How will payments be sent? And then there's page 5, the one about mechanics. This part matters more than it might seem at first glance, because it dictates how quickly the money can move. The Treasury is told to base advance payments on your 2024 tax return. Why last year's? Because it's already processed. That means payments can start going out in the weeks after the bill passes without waiting for everyone to file their 2025 returns next spring. It also expands the list of eligible bank accounts for direct deposit, if you've had any kind of federal payment sent to an account since 2023. Social Security, veterans benefits, child tax credit, you name it, that account can be used for the rebate. This one change could significantly cut down on the number of paper checks the Treasury has to mail out, which means faster delivery for most people. Special rules for non-filers and identification requirements. Turn to page 7, and here's that twist I mentioned earlier. If you didn't file a tax return for 2024, don't panic. The IRS can use your 2023 return instead. And if that's missing too, they're allowed to pull your Social Security Form 99 data. This is a direct response to what happened back in 2020 when some retirees almost missed out on stimulus payments entirely. Lawmakers don't want a repeat of that. By building in this data pipeline from the Social Security Administration straight to the Treasury, they're making sure seniors and non-filers don't get left behind this time. It's one of the quietest but most impactful adjustments in the whole Act. Page 8 spells it out. Treasury has to send you a notice within 15 days of issuing any payment. Think of it as a receipt. It will list the amount, the date, and the account or address it went to. This isn't just for formality, it's a record you can keep in case there's a dispute later. On that same page, the Social Security number rule kicks in. Everyone on the return taxpayer's spouse children must have a valid SSN. The only exception is for adopted children who can temporarily use an adoption taxpayer identification number, or AITN. The purpose is straightforward limit fraud and make sure the payments are going where they're supposed to go. Page 9 continues with the SSN rules, but adds a military carve-out. If one spouse served in uniform at any point during the tax year, the couple qualifies for the rebate even if only one spouse has a valid SSN. This comes from lessons learned in 2020, when mixed-status families, often with one U.S. citizen spouse and one non-citizen spouse, were shut out of stimulus payments. This time, lawmakers closed that gap before it could open. Administrative mechanisms and territorial payments. On page 10, the law moves into tax administration mechanics. The rebate is added to the list of math error items the IRS can correct automatically. That means if you make a simple mistake, say you accidentally list 2 kids instead of 1, the IRS can fix it on the spot without sending your return into a months-long audit. Think of it as a spell check for your taxes. It's a small change that could save a lot of frustration. Page 12 shifts focus to the territories Puerto Rico, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. These areas operate under mirror tax codes, meaning they handle their own tax systems, but in alignment with federal rules. Under the Act, the Treasury will send their governments a lump sum, and local agencies will distribute the payments. That matters because a significant percentage of Puerto Rican residents, for example, don't file U.S. federal tax returns. This mirror system keeps the treatment consistent, avoiding a second-class outcome for residents outside the 50 states. Page 12 also contains accounting details. The rebate is slotted under the Permanent Refund Appropriation in U.S. Code Section 31 U.S.C. 1324. That might sound dry, but it basically guarantees the funding can flow every year without needing Congress to pass a fresh spending bill as long as tariff revenue is still coming in. Real-life scenarios and eligibility for small businesses. Let's run through a couple of scenarios to see how this plays out in real life. First, Emma and Jordan. Married combined income last year of $85,000 with 2 kids. They're well under the phase-out threshold. That means they get $600 for each adult and $600 for each child. 4 times 600 equals $2,400. Now, if tariff revenue ends up higher than projected and the per-person amount floats up to $800, that same family's rebate would climb to $3,200. That could cover a full month of daycare, maybe 2, or refill an emergency savings account. Second, Alex, single with an adjusted gross income of $200,000. That's $125,000 over the single filer threshold. Multiply that overage by 5 cents per dollar, and the credit disappears entirely. This is how the law is structured. It's aimed squarely at low and middle-income households, not high earners. Small business owners often wonder if they're eligible. The answer, yes, if their net income after expenses comes in below the threshold. If you file a Schedule C partnerships or S-Corp pass-through income, you're treated like any other taxpayer. The only entities that don't qualify are corporations themselves. The rebate goes to people, not companies. Key protections and administrative details. Page 13 delivers a major point for many households. The rebate is shielded from garnishment for federal debts, back taxes, and even overdue child support. Supporters say this ensures families can use the money for essentials like rent, groceries, and utilities. Critics counter that it lets some debtors delay repayment, but Congress chose to prioritize liquidity for households. Alongside that, the law states overpayments won't build interest if the Treasury sends you too much and later reclaims it, you won't owe extra. It also grants the Treasury broad regulatory authority to deal with unusual situations quickly without needing a fresh act of Congress. The baseline remains $600 per adult and child, with potential for more if tariff revenues exceed projections. Analysts suggest this could happen given the expanded electronics duties that took effect in March 2025. Scams payment timeline and public debate. Whenever new payments make headlines, scammers jump in. The Treasury will never email you a claim link or call for your bank login. Payments will go through the same channel as your last refund or benefit, followed by an official paper notice within 15 days. If the bill becomes law, the earliest deposits could arrive within weeks of passage with a final deadline of December 31, 2026. This long window ensures broad coverage, but experience from past stimulus programs suggests the first wave moves quickly once systems are in place. The debate remains active. Yale's Budget Lab estimates tariffs cut median household purchasing power by about $2,400 per year, meaning a $600 check would only cover a fraction of that. Supporters point to job protection benefits, while critics see it as a partial giveback of money consumers already lost to higher prices. Legal uncertainty also hovers. Court rulings on presidential tariff authority could shrink revenues, capping the rebate at its floor. There's no backup funding source in the bill. Why $600 and how to prepare lawmakers describe $600 as a sweet spot, meaningful enough to help without adding inflationary pressure, and familiar from the pandemic-era checks in 2020 and 2021. It equals roughly a week's median take-home pay. To prepare, check your 2024 adjusted gross income. If it's near the threshold, consider IRA or HSA contributions to bring it down. Confirm your direct deposit details with the IRS, especially if you've changed banks, and update your mailing address with Social Security if that's your main income source. Stay alert for scams, and remember whether $600 feels significant or symbolic. Understanding the rules puts you in a better position to use it well. If you value calm, clear money talk, share this breakdown and subscribe for the next update.